mean, that AI is fantastic, but it's not going to replace. It's not going to replace a stonemason. It's not going to replace a joiner. Can't happen.
I'm Robin Johnson. This is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Steve Briggs from Briggs and Sons Masonry.
We always start on any of our projects from a point of conservation. So rather than what can we put back to what it looks like the original was, is how much of the original can we save and work with.
This show tells the story of the makers, the people that create things, whether it's in wood or metal, whether they're artists or musicians or chefs. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell their story.
If someone's attracted into stonemasonry because they've seen that, it's a bloody big fall from grace from there, because that's not the reality of it. The reality is you might be on a church tower in the rain, looking at the North Sea being blown off the scaffold, fitting a piece of label stone. It's not always that glamorous.
Yeah,
you have to love it.
I'm Robin Johnson. This is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Steve Briggs from Briggs and Sons Masonry. Steve, thanks for coming in.
No, pleasure.
So masonry, what is it? Tell me in a nutshell, what do you do?
So stonemasonry is the trade, and when I think of stonemasonry for us, where we are situated in Norfolk, it's a lot of church restoration work, and it is repairing old stonework. For us, again, we always start on any of our projects from a point of conservation. So rather than what can we put back to what it looks like the original was, is how much of the original can we save and work with. And sometimes that's not a stone repair. Sometimes that's a lime mortar repair. So yeah, stonemasonry, I think in different parts of the country would probably be defined possibly slightly different, but for us, where we are, there's a lot of repairing stone architectural details on church work, where you might have a label course which is meant to be ensuring water gets away from the building, which has failed over the years, and we'll be putting that back, and then that ends up aesthetically it completes the run, but also practically it keeps the water off the building and stops more decay from happening further down the line.
And so monumental stonemason would be someone different. That's someone that's doing like gravestones and things like that.
Yeah, it is. So that is quite challenging now in marketing. So I quite often get leads come through asking for headstones.
Right.
It is something that we've looked at. We were very, very close to acquiring a headstone manufacturers near where we are. It didn't quite go over the line, but very different skill sets. A lot of that is letter cutting, not so much carving, similar skill set, but letter cutting. And actually a lot of that is done now on a shot blasting machine. So it is more of a production line than a real. I don't want to do it down, because there probably is a lot of companies out there still doing it by hand, but a lot of it is shot blasting the letters, maybe finishing it by hand and then painting it by hand. But yeah, slightly different.
Now, we've done a bit of, what do you call it? It's like ecclesiastical work. It's when you work on churches. I think ecclesiastical work, yeah. I remember once a conservation officer, I won't name any names, but a conservation officer, we're remaking a door. And it's a classic oak church door that is all twisted and all rotten. And they wanted to save as much of it as possible. And we were having to get the conservation officer to come down to the workshop to actually poke his finger in the oak that was rotten and say, look, we've got to replace that, and we've got to replace that. In the end, I think on that door we had maybe 4 of the original beads and the window beads, because it was like a kind of a Gothic curved thing with stained glass windows in. I think 4 of the original beads, we say, there may be 1 of the rails. The whole rest of it was new. And we were kind of saying to the restoration, to the conservation officer, surely it's better to make this door new, but make it look exactly the same. He said, no, you've got to keep as much of it as possible. But then, so there's that, where we're making something almost completely new again, but putting a few beads in, which seemed a bit crazy. But then I keep seeing these videos popping up of people doing restoration work on church doors and windows and stuff, and they're using that resin, that kind of red resin, and poking it in and then painting over it. And I think, well, why is it that you go to all that effort to make a door but save the original beads, but then at the same time you're letting someone cut bits out and then pump it full of plastic. Doesn't make sense to me.
It's really difficult. I mean, so we run 2 businesses. We've got the main contract business, and that's effectively set up as a sort of old school builder. We've got a lot of the trades in-house, all traditional trades. We've also got a consultancy business, and in that business, we work with owners of listed houses, residential mostly, and we do all their listed building consents, design work, surveys, management, maintenance plans, etc. And then that works as a good lead gen for our main contracting business, who then take on the projects afterwards and then care for it after that. What we found with conservation officers is, because in conservation there isn't like building regs where there's a hard and fast, you have to do this. A lot of it is can come down to personal preference. And the difference between restoration and conservation is quite nuanced. And what you just described with that door, for me, falls into restoration. That isn't a conservation job. So keeping small pieces of mould in, for me, is nonsense. And the general rule of thumb that I think we work to in conservation principles is 70%. So if you can keep 70% of the original, you should be trying to do everything you can to do that, or vice versa. So for me, I am conservation. That is my go. That's everything that we do in business now is run from that. What is the best thing to do for the original fabric of the building? And that's how we sort of triage the building, how we work out what's gone wrong, because we understand how it was built in the first place. And we take everything back to the original construction, which is generally the simplest and easiest way forward. And then we match the materials as close to that as we can. The conservation officers can be really difficult to work with.
Well, I'm glad you said it.
Yeah. Might be alienating a lot of...
Do you know, we've worked with one actually locally here who's brilliant. He's actually left the council. He was getting a bit frustrated, I think, and set up a consultation office similar to what you're describing. He was really, really good. The other people, it just seems like sometimes they justify their own existence by making people jump through millions of loopholes, which just seem absolutely ludicrous and pointless.
It's really frustrating because I think the perception of people who own these big listed homes, if you imagine a big Georgian farmhouse, for instance, we work on a lot of those being in Norfolk. Not all of them are mega wealthy people. You know, some of them maybe have sold a house in London and moved up, and they've used all of their money to buy this house. They haven't got hundreds of thousands, millions in the bank to then do the work to it. And they just want to live in it. And they just want to enjoy the history of the building. They don't want to turn it into a white box. And there are simple things that they should be allowed to do to allow their family to live in that home comfortably. And one of the things which seems to be very contentious is the windows, and not changing sash windows into double glazed windows and etc. And we've worked on a few where, I mean, one comes to mind straight away. We managed to get listed building consent to take all of this cement render off the front of the building. It was soaking wet on the inside, so it had to come off. But then they wanted us to re-render it in lime, but the client wanted it to be left in brickwork. So we spent 9 months restoring all of the brickwork. Got permission for it. Obviously, we wouldn't ever do anything without permission. But when they were trying to get permission for the sash windows to be upgraded, they wouldn't allow them to do it. So we've gone through all the effort to make the building dry again, change the parapet detail, change all the lead work at the back of the box cut. It was terrible detail. Some things that we thought were quite contentious. It had a big oak. I think it may have been thatched previously, and that had gone, and it got re-roofed in slate. So the parapet details, parapet walls are really high when they would have been, you would have a thick thatch abutting it. So there's some details that were not quite right. So we managed to get all those passed, and that was fine. But they wouldn't allow complete replacement of the sash windows. So when we've come in to do the sash repairs, I think there was 12 windows on the front. 10 of them had to be completely rebuilt on site anyway. But they wouldn't allow us to change the glass to slimline double glaze.
Which that baffles me, because you really can't tell the difference unless you look really, really closely. Certainly from the outside, you can't tell the difference. And if you look really closely, Slimlight is what, 12 mil overall?
Yeah.
Which is really quite small. I think thinking about it, that glass is probably going to be half inch. A lot of those sort of windows, they might be half inch glass if they're really old, and down to about 4 mil, some, little thin panes of it.
Yeah, but many of them.
You really, especially if they're puttied in, you won't really notice. But the difference in the U value and the heat that it will keep in the house is massive.
Yeah, I just think the difference for the people who are actually living in the house would be massive.
Yeah.
And as I say, even if they are mega wealthy, they're still committing to put in what would end up being a derelict home of historic importance. They're still putting their own cash into, because there's no grants available generally for privately owned residential properties. So it's all their own cash going in. I strongly feel like conservation officers and that whole system should be set up to support the longevity of these buildings. And part of that is the end use. We have it in churches all the time. I've had countless conversations with PCCs on jobs we've been on. What can we do with this building after we've made it habitable again? What can you do? What can you do with them? They can't be turned into residential. What do you do with them? But a residential home where someone wants to live in it with a little bit of common sense, I think would be greatly received. But since Christmas, I've looked at 6 different projects where people have bought a listed home, and there's considerable amount of work to be done to them, and all of them have said, "Do we have to go through a conservation officer?" Because they're all worried about being told no, that they can't do what they want to do. And it's a shame. I think there should be an easiest. I mean, the councils need to work on this rather than me, but it should be set up so listed homeowners feel comfortable to go and have those conversations and ask the questions, not feeling like they're going to be vilified and told that they can't live in these homes.
Yeah, it seems like if you get a good conservation officer, they're worth the weight in gold, because if they're sensible, and I think that's what it comes down to, it's common sense. I remember putting planning and conservation applications in for places locally around here, and one got rejected because it wasn't in keeping with all the other properties nearby. This was a house on a road in the middle of the countryside. The nearest house was probably a mile away. It's not like you're going to go for a walk and look at this house and say, "Oh, that's really different to the next house along." And actually, the 2 or 3 nearest houses that were within 2 or 3 miles, one was modern, a modern new build, probably 10 years old. The other one was probably 400 years difference in this property, 400 years older. So what are we trying to do? Like, there's a modern house there, we're in the middle, and there's a really old one there. That one in the middle, you almost want it to be a mixture of the old and the new. But it just seemed wild. It's not in keeping. It's not in keeping with what the fields around it. It just didn't make any sense. But there's all these same sort of battles. It was putting Slimlight double glazing windows in exactly the same, 12 panel sliding sashes or whatever, or 16 panel, whatever it was. But why don't we just use Slimlight? It's going to look exactly the same, and all of these. There's other things as well about not putting cables or pipes in the walls or under the floorboards. Everything had to be surface mounted, and that just made no sense to me, because I get it, you don't want to damage the fabric of a building, but surely putting a little hole through or lifting the floorboard and running a pipe under the floor is 100 times better than seeing a run of surface mounted pipes or surface mounted cables, right?
Yeah, I think I mean, this is good to contradict what I was saying earlier on, but every building needs to be taken on its merit. We've worked in what we would class as quite modern buildings that have been listed, and the historic importance of the building is very low. In those instances, if you've got an opportunity to bury some cables in the wall or if your floorboards are up anyway, I don't see why you wouldn't be allowed to do that. We've also worked in medieval halls, and where this is an extreme example, but there's still medieval paintings on the wall. You're not going to open that wall up to get cables in there. So I think everything needs to be taken on merit and just approached with some level of common sense. to your point, and this year we've had a couple of these. We were on a street building that we're going to be working on next to another listed building. Conservation officer on this one wanted a complete contrast in the extension. So you've got a nice mid 18th century with a really modern extension on the back. And I quite like that, if I'm honest. I like that juxtaposition. I think it's really interesting. If you get the detail in between the two, right? And if you get the material build up inside that, so when the two break, it's clear internally as well. So you feel like you're walking out from an old into a new. I think if you get that right, it's beautiful design, and the architecture and it's stunning. It works really well. If you get it wrong, obviously, it's not so good. But out of the one we're working on, the conservation officer wants to like to the original structure of the building. So you just don't know, and that's the frustrating thing about that whole process. Because I could sit with a client for hours and talk about what we think we could get through and what would work and what's in line with the client's wants and needs for the building. And a conservation officer could then come and say, actually, no, we want that to be glass, all of that glass. Devastates the budget. And the clients say, well, we don't actually want glass. So then that project is either stopped or put on the back burner. It's difficult, but it's like everything. If once the conservation officers know, I'd say this because it's my business, but it seems to me like once they know the building is being looked after by someone who knows what they're doing, they will listen to your points and why you're trying to get to where you're trying to get to. Understanding the materials that you're going to use on that building and being able to articulate that to them, I think it's critically important to try and move that process forward as smoothly as you can and get to a point where everyone is usually equally unhappy.
Everyone's compromised a little bit.
Yeah. Like
so what is it about masonry that kind of got you into it? I know you're third generation stonemason.
Yeah.
So
loosely.
Was loosely.
Yeah.
Via Sainsbury's on the way. Yeah. So has it always been something that you've aspired to do? Has it been kind of in your blood, and because your dad's doing it and your granddad's doing it, you always knew that you were going to do it?
No.
Or have you kind of found your way there accidentally?
I think I probably was always going to end up doing it, but I tried many things before I did do it. As you say, my dad's a mason. He's a proper stonemason, as was my granddad. I haven't done an apprenticeship. I haven't, I trained with my dad. He taught me. I remember going on a job on the MOD building in London with Dad when I was 10, probably maybe even 9. So I've always been around it.
How did he get a security clearance for a
10-year-old? He wouldn't have asked.
He's my whole carrier.
Yeah, don't worry about him. He gets the tease. So yeah, I've always been around it. I was okay when I started doing it, but not to the level that the masons around me at the time were. I loved it. It's, as you say, I think it's in my blood. I still love it. I love having the conversations about it. Especially on the church work when you go and, well, not just church work, older buildings, but when you go and you've got to try and analyze what the stone is and then find an appropriate match. Because of working with Dad for so long and around him for so long, I'm really good at that. We've pivoted in our business. We don't really do a huge amount of that now, unfortunately. But I love it. I think if I could build the size of business that I aspire to get to, just doing that, I would do that. But there just isn't the amount of work where we are to get to that level. But yeah, to your actual question, I've tried all sorts of trades in the run up. As I said to you before, I wanted to be a carpenter. I actually wanted to be a policeman, but I'm really glad I didn't pursue that in the end. And I wanted to be a cowboy at one point, so you could argue full circle. Yeah, so I worked with one of my dad's friends in the school holidays and some weekends doing carpentry, and I loved it. Then I worked in Sainsbury's on the deli. I've worked in a pitch and putt golf, crazy golf thing from £3 an hour for a period of time when I was at school. So I've always worked. Worked in a boat yard doing boat building, fiberglass. That was horrible. Then I did eventually start working in a joinery shop, which I loved. I absolutely loved the smell of I still love it when you go and see joinery companies we work for. I love it. But yeah, that didn't work out, unfortunately. He promised an apprenticeship. It didn't quite come off. I'd done sales for Zenith Windows for a while. That started well until you sort of understand the process behind the scenes of what that is. And I'd lasted about 10 weeks doing that. Good experience. And the training was fantastic. But yeah, the problem, there was just the morals and ethics behind that were not for me. Then what did I go into? Roofing. Done 2 years on the roof, which again, I really enjoyed. And then eventually, I can't remember quite how it went, but so my dad, he used to work in London all the time for a company who's based in Battlesbridge in Essex, doing stonework. Then we moved to Norfolk, and he carried on working in London, which was difficult because he'd be there all week. Then he'd come home, and because we bought this big Victorian terrace that was in a right to proper state, and so at the weekend he was only there on a Saturday. He'd be working on the house on a Saturday. Then he'd drive back down to London on the Sunday afternoons. We basically didn't see him for about 10 months. Big move for my mum when we moved anyway. So she was now up in Norfolk, basically on her own with 3 kids and however many dogs we had at the time. So we then moved to Chelmsford, which was great. I loved it in Chelmsford. Was there for 10 months, moved back to Norfolk, long story short. He'd always worked on and off for this company in Battlesbridge. So that he then started running all their projects in Norfolk. So all the heritage sites that they'd be working on, he'd be the site manager for. So eventually he got me to go and work with him as his labourer on big town hall in which is sort of Norfolk Suffolk border. Really interesting project. And I loved it. I loved every second of being on that site. I loved being with Dad. But learning from the other trades on there and just being amongst the builders, it was brilliant. It was great. Long journeys from where we were in the morning to get to site. And it was good. I loved it. And so we probably done a good 10 to 12 projects together as sort of a management team. And I went from labouring to actually fixing stone, learned how to do flint work, flint napping, bit of brick repairs, but really got involved in the lime mortars, specifications, mixing, etc. And in fact, because I'm his son, I got a bit more insight into like the monthly site meetings, for instance, the conversations with architects when you're walking around and the clients. So I'd sit in on the PCC meetings on the church restoration stuff. So I'd really got good insight into what that needed to look like. Not at that point with any aspirations to set my own business up, but you just take these things in, I think, as you're around it. And again, long story short, we're working at Framlingham Castle, which is where Ed Sheeran sung the song about Castle on the Hill, whatever is that one. And by this point, I was doing all of the old man's paperwork, and I was fixing stone, getting the site set up. So I was basically assistant site manager, and they paid me £80 a day. All the fixers were on about 140, 150. I thought, I'm doing at least as much as them plus the paperwork. Plus I take it home with me because I've got an hour and a half with Dad in the van on the way home. So I asked for some more money. They said no, because you haven't got any qualifications. So toys went out the pram, and I left, and I applied to go to Colchester Institute to do a degree in construction management. And my GCSEs were horrendous. So I thought, I'm probably not going to get in, but I've got to do something. And I did. I got in on the strength of my experience on site. So set the business up, 2014, started uni in September. So done that part-time while I was building the business. And then I think probably maybe a year in, the old man then jumped across, and the rest is history, I suppose.
Wow. That's quite a journey.
Yeah, it is quite a journey. Again, as I was saying earlier on, my ambition, I don't know where it come from, but my ambition was always way higher than my skill set and ability to run a business. So it's been a bumpy journey.
I think though, if you looked at business owners, particularly trade business owners, if you looked at them across the country, I think you'll find you're in good company, because probably most business owners have got more ambition than they got skill. It's the smart thing is finding the people with the skill with maybe not quite as much ambition, and then getting hold of them and getting them to come and work for you.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's difficult to find good people, as you well know. We have over the years, we've had some great people, but on the flip side of that, we've had some real problems. I think where things started to change for me in my mind was when I started listening to podcasts. And I started, because previously I'd never read a book in my life. And then I started picking up some books on self-development, and I started working with a business coach. And when we couldn't really afford to do it, but I thought something had to change, because I was just getting to the point where I was trying all the things that I knew and we wasn't pushing it on. In fact, we were getting worse, and because we were growing quickly, you don't grow through problems. It just compounds the problems you're having. And I didn't have other business owners around me. I still don't really, which is something I need to work on. But I didn't have anyone to ask. And my dad was just really wanted me to do well. And I think he saw it in me that I could do well. He's not from a business background at all. He's never been around it. He's just a very, very good mason and tradesman. So there wasn't anyone I really knew to go to ask. So I'm just sort of fumbling through trying to make it work. But he was so, and still is so supportive. And I've always been one to learn by mistakes as opposed to finding an easy path. So that's what we did. We continued to do until, as I say, I found podcasts, and I found people online who you can listen to and just learn from their experiences and try and implement them as best you can in the business as you grow.
So you more, your day-to-day, you're running the business, not so much on the tools?
Yeah. We just brought in a good manager. Trying again to bring in a good manager. Where I went wrong previously was I had in my head, because of what I was listening to, you have to be out of the bit, you got to be working on the business, not in the business. I was focused so much on getting out of the business that I forgot that there is a business to run. And that was a massive, massive problem, which I've learned a hell of a lot from now. So yeah, my day to day is running the business, project management as well, but I'm trying to bring in other people, and so I've always wanted to promote from within, which again creates a lot of problems, because there's the book, the E-Myth, which talks about entrepreneurial seizures, where tradesmen become businessmen, or start a business. I think it's the same thing in management. A good tradesman doesn't necessarily make a good manager, and there's a lot of personal relationships that get forgotten about. They're all mates on site, and it's difficult for them to jump up and then manage them. So that, in an ideal world, is what we would do, and we've tried to do, but it doesn't always work. So yeah, my day to day really is pricing work, meeting clients. So the consultancy business is where I love spending my time, because it just allows me to speak about conservation to people who need the advice that I've got in my head. So it's a great ego tickle. But to take a project from like that first conversation, listed building consent, get the consents, get them what they've asked for, and then deliver the project for them, that whole process is so valuable for them. But I love being involved in that whole process, but I don't want to be really involved in that whole process, and that's where we're trying to take the business. So the people who are good at the management day to day are doing that, and I get to sort of hover around and make sure the culture's correct, and the conservation, that's the critical thing for me and our business, is that conservation is at the forefront of everything that we do, every decision, every minute of every day. And that's being adhered to, which is difficult, because it is a difficult mix. It's a difficult mix of skill sets. And I've just sort of come to the conclusion now that the size of the business that I want isn't going to be in that sphere. That isn't going to be it. So we're now looking at what we can offer to the same clients that are going to be beneficial, but will be different businesses around that.
Makes sense. If you're keeping your clients happy doing what you're doing, why would they go anywhere else for any other service that you want to provide, right? Do you find, I find that when I start early doors on the design phase of a project and see it through planning, conservation, whatever. And then when we get, boots on the ground, we're making the stuff. Then if we rarely fit, but if we're fitting as well, I find that consumes me a lot. And I've been trying to work on distancing myself from that and I know it's only because I care about those projects so much. You feel personally invested in them. I mean, you are invested in them, right? But you feel personally invested in them to the point that, if something's not absolutely perfect, do it again. It has to be right when it goes in. It has to be perfect. If the customer wants to change your mind, bend over backwards, do whatever you want. This needs to be the most perfect thing ever. And what I've been trying to do is distance myself from it, because I just get overwhelmed with it a little bit, especially when we're sort of near the end. I won't be thinking about anything else apart from this one project. Or we might have 20 projects going on at once, but each one of them I'll feel so close to that even when it's finished, I almost, say for instance, it's a hotel we've done or something like that, I'll treat it like it's my own hotel. I'll go there and I'll be looking at what the staff are wearing and what they're serving for dinner and stuff like that. I'm thinking, this could be improved. But it's not my place, Really, I try and distance myself to go, right, is the joinery we provided the best it can possibly be? Great, fantastic. Thank you very much. See you later. But I find it really hard to do that because you invest so much into it. It's like it's almost like you got another child there or something.
Yeah, I think that's a great mindset for aiming at perfection all the time. I think it's a good thing. The difference,
it's tiring though.
Yeah, I'm sure. The difference between yourself and me in that respect is you are a craftsman. Your background is building the thing and making it beautiful. In my mind, I never got to the level where I was capable of that level of craft because I always wanted to come out and run a business. So for me in business over the years, I always say it in our meetings, my job, I feel, is to facilitate the opportunities for my craftsmen to go and do their best work. And then I'm on to the next thing. I'm on to pricing the next project, on getting the pre-contract stuff sorted out for the next project. And then I'll come and look at I think in a way there's pros and cons of everything, but in a way that works well because to a degree, when I go on a site, I will notice some stuff that's clearly not right from a like a snagging position, but also I can see it from a client's position as opposed to just the craft. So there's obvious things a client's going to pick up on, and if they see that, they then start looking for other things. So I think we've got a reasonable balance there. But I wish I was more leaning towards what you just described.
Well, I find myself in the same position as you. As we've got bigger, I'm less and less on the tools. In fact, we were joking about it earlier, but if I'm tools on a bench, then something's probably gone wrong. We were a bit behind, but I'll always, 9 times out of 10, I'll do the install with some of my team, but because I think it's important because it's client facing, I want to be responsible for that going in and making sure it's, if there's decisions that have to be made, that I'm the one making those decisions that might affect the outcome of it. But yeah, in the workshop, it's very rare now. Not that I don't have the time, but I've been lucky to find people, and always try and employ people that are better than me. I haven't got the ego that I need to be the best joiner or furniture maker in the world. They're all better than me as far as I'm concerned, particularly now because I'm not living it every day like those guys are. So very much the same. My job is to get those guys to the position where they can do their best work, and then facilitate that by giving them a good workshop, best machines, whatever equipment they need, or staff to help them, or whatever it is to get, to make the boat go faster, to get to that end product the most efficient and the best possible way, the best outcome. So I'm all about that, and I've changed my mindset from going, how can I do the best work physically with the tools and machines, to make the best product, to how can I then facilitate them doing the best work by buying the machines or buying the equipment or different members of staff or whatever it is. So that was quite a shift, and one that I found I didn't take to straight away. And also the first couple of people that I employed, were friends and stuff like that. But when I first started employing people, that were better than I was, that was quite a weird thing. Settled into it pretty quickly, but I remember the first couple of people that I employed that were better than me at what I was doing, I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be the boss here, but I realised pretty quickly that
just second.
But I realised quickly that you can still be the boss and have people that are a lot better at you in the business that you're working in. And in fact, that's probably the optimal thing to do, is to employ people that are better than you, so you can just do your bit of being the boss without having, and let them get on with the work.
Yeah, we would be awful if I didn't employ people who were better than me.
Same.
We would be a terrible business. And again, it's working with my dad, because he's so bloody good. I don't think I would ever have got there anyway. Because I started a lot later than he did. Some people just got it, haven't they? And what the thing they do, they just get it. And we've had a guy, Dan, who worked for us previously. His flint work and restoration of masonry is an unbelievable level. And you look at it and you think, I was quite good, but I don't think with 20 years on the tools I would have got to as good as he, because it's something in him. It's more of a, it isn't just a trade to him. He loves it so much that every flint he lays is laid. It's not just chucked in the wall and pointed up. It's just a different level. And unfortunately, I don't think I would have ever got there. Just didn't have the want, but also probably didn't have the ability. So I am more than comfortable employing people that are better than me, because we'd never get anywhere otherwise.
When you're talking about flint, are you talking about the chipped flint that you see in the side of churches and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's, I worked at a private school. I was a DT teacher at a private school down this way, and they're part of a group of schools, and all of them, the chapel rooms and the main building stuff, are all chipped. I think they call it chipped flint finish.
Yeah, napped, yeah.
Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, really common in Norfolk.
Is it?
Yeah. Not always what we call napped flint, but sometimes, actually a lot of cobbles. So literally just out the ground or out the quarry, and it's in the wall.
With the sort of honed face rather than the cut face?
Yeah, sort of round.
Oh, okay.
Potato-shaped flints, yeah.
Interesting. And is all of your work sort of in one area? And do you find if you go out of that area to do other work, then the finishes are different? Is it over time? I'm not an expert in conservation buildings. We've done enough restoration and conservation work in kind of churches and old buildings around here to know what the masons or the joiners or the furniture makers from around here did. But I'm always amazed when I go, like an hour up the road, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Different materials, different styles, or even time periods, it's very different. Do you find that when you leave Norfolk, not only people have less toes, but also the buildings are completely different?
Yes, absolutely, you're correct. And we had the conservation officers, I think, have. So we had an example. I don't know whether I'm going to come out very well in my area after this.
Be the most hated.
Yeah, the most. Yeah. He was from Newcastle,
right?
And we were having a conversation about material palettes on this job, and what he was saying just wasn't ringing true to what we knew about the material palette in Norfolk. It's a big county, so you have different build types through the different places in Norfolk. There's like a sort of reddy, orangey stone called cast stone, which is sort of up towards Kingsley and around that area is predominantly that. And then chalk buildings are similar through that area. But where we are is a lot of flint and brick. So yeah, absolutely. Historically, they would have built with what they had available to them, which is why you'll find different areas across the country are built in whatever the local stone or byproduct of mining the fields or whatever is, and they built with flint. Interestingly, depending on your leaning, if this is interesting or not, it's interesting to us. When they used to take arms over to Normandy, when the boats were coming back, they would put cast stone in the boats as ballast. So along the coasts, you do often find a French stone, Caen, C-A-E-N, where it'd come back from across as ballast. So sometimes we're trying to find a match for Caen stone, which you sometimes can't get, knowing it was sort of it's a byproduct. It wasn't even built. It didn't come across as a building product. It was then used as a building product. Now we're trying to replicate that it's vernacular building is the term.
So are you sourcing that from Normandy in France then, when you have to replace it?
We don't now, because we don't do a huge amount of it. we will go to quarries in the UK and they will find it for us. We'll ask for what we need. There's a good match for that called Le Pen. Sometimes has blue veins running through it. But it's a really fine stone, very, very similar to Caen, but not an exact match. So you use the closest thing that you can. It's French, so that will work.
Interesting. And do you get involved with like the roofs and stuff like that? Say if someone gave you a church project, you do the whole lot.
Yeah. We're moving back towards that pretty quickly at the moment. We're just finding that we've got some brilliant subcontractors who work for us and have done for years, but they're brilliant, so they're busy. So getting them to align with our whole project is really difficult. So we are moving more towards that again. So we will do, obviously we do church work, but we will take on extensions to listed buildings. So we need to be set up to be able to do everything really. And our whole, the ethos and what we're building towards is this heritage hub where anyone who owns a listed home or looks after a listed building can come to us and we have the solution to their problem. And in doing that, I think naturally you're going to have to have access to these trades more freely. So we don't have our own plumbers and we don't have our own electricians, but pretty much everything else we've got. I'd love to have a joinery shop, but it's a bit of a way off.
I don't know. I don't know. At times, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. We're just getting a gas heated spray booth put in. My friend's going to run the gas line stuff. And he said, often he gave me the unit, the annual unit consumption that thing's probably going to use. And I looked at him and was like, my God, my gas bill is going to be the cost of someone's salary, at least, if not more. It depends how often we use it.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be, I'm going to make them work in the cold, I think. Saw the consumption figures. But he said, my friend said, I often question whether expansion is better or not. And I said, I know, I probably do about 200 times a day. You think, do we want to spend this much money? Do we want to, tag ourselves with all this debt, or not even debt, like another lease or another, almost another debt of a future debt of gas bills, all this stuff, is it really worth it? But there's many times where I think that probably the easiest money that not because the work was easy, but the easiest money I ever made was when it was just me and maybe one or two other people, hardly any overhead, pretty nimble, do a bit of everything. But then I think, but I'd never get then the bigger, more impressive jobs. It'd just be me, and I'd be limited to doing bits of furniture and maybe a kitchen here or there. But then the margins were really good.
Yeah, I don't know. If you ever come to a conclusion, do let me know.
But I think the hardest graft, right, is sort of 1 to 5 employees. That's manageable. 5 to 15, that's the hardest thing, because you kind of got to you're probably on the tools a little bit. You're still doing all of the management, but plus some, because you've now got all these other people. You're now managing people. If you've got 3 or 4, you're there, you're leading from the front. Whereas if you 5+, you're not always going to be there, because you then got to start pulling in more work. So you're not on the bench or on site or whatever. So things can start to slip. But when you get to sort of 12, 13, 14, you kind of have to get a bit of management team or structure there as well. And when you get that in place, if you get the right people, suddenly it becomes really easy. So then like 12 to 20, walk in the park. But then the problem comes with, and there's always problems with like staff. You might get a rotten apple in your recruitment, and actually the challenge is finding those staff. But I think if you get the management in place earlier, not too early, because then it's a real expense that you can't really afford. But if you get the management in place at the right sort of time, the expansion's all right. But then the problem for us anyway is space. We need to have a certain amount of space to have a certain amount of benches, and then take on another unit, and then it's equipment, and then it's finishes, and then all of a sudden we're trying to do everything, like you were saying, bring everything in house, and then you end up with multiple.
It's also that
workshops.
Chicken and egg, isn't it? Do you go and win the big projects and grow into it and panic, bring people? Well, actually, I guess I'm answering it myself. And then panic, bring people in to deliver the project, or do you get the people and make sure you're there? Trying to, at best, break even for you, while you go out and win the big contracts that they can go into and then grow. I don't know the answer. I'm not sure I'll ever know the answer.
Well, I can tell you the answer to that. You win the projects, because you can't afford. There's no business that can afford to be overstaffed with really good people, but not have the work coming in.
Also, good people don't want to stand around doing nothing.
Exactly. You've got to have that. You've got to have that carrot for your staff, but also to bring people in. If you're interviewing people and you go, yeah, well, we've got this massive project, big things that they can sink their teeth into. If they're ambitious or they enjoy their work, they're going to go for that straight away. If you're interviewing people and they're saying, what's your pipeline look like? Well,
could be good.
We've got a couple of things maybe.
Yeah, we've got so much potential.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't sell on potential.
No.
You can't sell your business to a potential employee just on the potential that you might have a couple of jobs. So for me, it's always win the work. I used to joke about it quite a lot. I'd say yes to anything and then work out how to do it after I've said yes.
Yeah, I think we all do that.
Yeah.
Even
now.
You
have to. Right? I mean, now at least we know how to do it and how we're going to manage it. But I think, we've always lived on that edge of probably a bit too much work. We've probably got a bit too much work than what our output is. We're always kind of teetering on that edge, and then we'll expand a little bit, and then the output's kind of managed, but then we'll take on something bigger, and it's kind of been like that for about a good couple of years now, and that's what excites me as well, because it's like that. It's really exciting because it's always like, oh, what's that next thing? What's that next?
Have you got a size or a goal, either staff level or turnover, or you've got so much equipment. Is there?
Been nice there to pay for itself.
Yeah, I wonder. Is there a goal in mind where you want to take it to?
Yes and no. Often, I think I love it how it is, and if we can just consolidate now with everything that we've got and everyone that we've got, we know what our output is, and we just take on the good projects to fill our books with what we've got. But then that's also really boring. And then I've got ambitions to be the biggest and best joinery in the country. And I look to what my bigger probably not competitors, not the right word because we're not doing the same sort of work, but I look at the biggest joineries in the country who are doing the kind of bespoke work that we do. We're like small fry compared to some of them. Oh yeah. We're like 20 employees. Some of them are 200. So it's like 10x, but then with that comes so many steps of management that we'd be so far removed from the work that's happening on bench. I think for us and probably I'd imagine with you guys as well, there's a size that you almost have to stick to still ensure that all the care and quality control is there. Whereas if you get too big, those are the first things that start to go wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
And the culture as well.
Yeah, we spoke about it earlier, didn't we? At our biggest, we'd be running 10, 12 projects, 30, early 30s staff. But because we went from, 5 projects is probably too many, to 5 to 8 to 10, we were just getting people in to try and get through the work, and we're taking people off one job to go and get another one finished. Just can't invoice on that job because we haven't done enough, and then you're constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're still turning good money, but you're not keeping a bloody penny of it. And that's the example earlier on. I used to walk onto sites and think, whose job is this? It doesn't even look like one of our projects. We're so far gone from where, firstly, the reason why we set up in the first place. And again, it goes back to my ambition not being too far disconnected from where my skill set was or my knowledge level was. And also not having something to work towards. I had an arbitrary turnover number in my head. And I had another goal that was completely irrelevant, but when really in the grand scheme of things. And all I was doing was pushing and pushing to hit that turnover. And I completely took my eye off everything else. This time, that isn't happening. We're on a project at the minute, which I don't think I'm allowed to say too much about. They've been really, it's a bit odd, but it's a great project for us. There's an opportunity for us to do all the internals as well. It's a couple of £1 million on the internals, but we'd have to start yesterday. So, before I would have said, absolutely, we'll be there, would you get it done? But now I'm looking at it thinking, do we have the management in place to do it? Do we have the access to the accounts to get the materials on site quick enough to do it? And the answer is no. So we're not doing it. And that, I wouldn't get to this point where I can make that decision had we not gone through all the pain of the growth previously. So, and it was painful, all the same you'll hear from a lot of people in business, remortgage the house, personal loans, etc., still paying them now. I wouldn't change any of that. Or, my wife may want to have changed some of that. And, we had our kids through that period as well. Horrendous. There were some really, really dark, awful days. But I genuinely wouldn't change any of that, because I think the clarity that I now have and the switch in my mindset as to what we're chasing is going to make us it's going to make me a better businessman, a better person, and such a better business for clients to come and work with. And what we're offering, I think, is really unique. And I think the service level that we are able to provide, because we are reasonably small still, is so much better than anyone else around. And our thing, and my thing always with the lads, is like the fact that we can deliver the craft to a high level is why we're there. But the customer care, the cleanliness on the site, how you interact with everyone around you is why we will be invited back. And that's the thing we need to focus on more, arguably, than actually delivering the trade. Because for homeowners, they're not really, for us, it's different because you're in the trade and you love the craft, etc. So you're going to look at how tight a joint is or finish on the, those things that matter to you. They don't necessarily matter to the client. What matters to the client is you haven't ruined their carpet. The music isn't really loud when they get on site. The site toilet and everything's tidy and hidden if you can. When they speak to their neighbour, they're not going to say, the finish on the lime mortar point, it was absolutely, the aggregate was polished on the lime mortar. These conversations are not happening. They are for us internally, but that's not what they speak about when we're gone. They're going to say how tidy we were, how polite we were, etc. That level of tradesman is really, really hard to find. We've got a brilliant team who really buy into that, but growing that culture is really hard. And focusing on turnover and pushing those metrics is completely is counterintuitive, I think, to longevity and growth over a sustained period of time, which is a big, big lesson and a hard lesson to learn.
A friend of mine says he's a QS or project manager, and he says he loves working in construction, but he said it's kind of difficult because essentially who you're working with, who you're managing, often, especially if you're working on a tender and someone comes in the cheapest on the tender and you have to give them the job because that's what the QS said or the whatever client has said, you're essentially working with the kids that you went to school with that sat at the back of the class and ate crayons. And that's who you're now dealing with, on a day-to-day basis. And first of all, I thought, I'm a bit offended by that because I ate pencils, not crayons.
Yeah, right? Strong tea.
Yeah, I was at the front, not the back. But he's kind of right. And I've been on sites when you walk in, the opposite of what you've described. You walk in, if there's a site toilet, you don't want to go anywhere near it. There's blokes walking around, smoking in the house, swearing. The carpets are ruined. It's like your typical builder, the sort of thing that if you had a family, you wouldn't want to leave them alone in the house when those sort of trades are working there. And I've seen it time and time again. What we're trying to offer, really similarly, I joke about it, but I call us the white glove joinery because we're there, we're polite, we're well dressed, we make no mess, everything's perfect, and it's like. You couldn't say a bad word about anything, any interaction with us, parking, the vans look good, everything else like that. It all has to be perfect because it's part of the whole service. It's that kind of, it's the white glove service that you might get a silver service or hospitality or something like that. Essentially, I'm trying to say to the guys, you need to be almost like a butler. If someone comes in, you hold the door and thank you very much after you. It goes a long way. I think.
It goes a really long way. Some of the things you've just described. We still have those problems on our sites. The conclusion that I've come to in all this is, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, facilitating the opportunities for the craftsmen to go and do their craft. Well, they're really honed in on what they're doing because they love it and that's what they want to be there doing. They don't really want to be watching what their boots as they walk in the house or whatever else. So that's when we need a layer of management in there, and almost solely focusing on the culture and how we were acting on site. That comes at a cost, but you only get the opportunities to increase your margins on jobs when you have successfully delivered jobs like that and your reputation improves. So that has to be me doing that. And I haven't got the time to do that because we're looking at every other opportunity that can, to price work and move into different markets, different offerings. So you have to go through them growing pains, don't you, always? And again, going back to, do you get the work in? Do you get the people in? Do you try and retrain the guys you've got, or do you allow them the space to just go and do their job? Again, I don't know the answer. We're still tinkering with that and trying to work out the best way to do it. Maybe the easiest thing is don't focus on it. Just go and do the jobs and move away. But it's that thing about if it's measured, it's managed. And I think if I keep going on site and telling them we're not happy with, you should be doing this, this, and this, there's a frustration for them because I'm not, always patting them on the back about the work they're doing. But they do understand the reasons why we're doing it and where we're trying to take the business. I think it all comes down to people, ultimately. And good people wanting to work for good business owners and good businesses. But what do you do? There's only so many hours in the day, isn't there? It's what do you spend your time doing most?
And with trades, as we were saying earlier, the best people probably are out on their own, getting their own work in. So as a business employing tradesmen, you've kind of got to manage your expectations of who you're going to be able to employ that isn't already getting their own work, and how can you kind of mold them into the employee that you want. And that's how we look at it. We know the best joiners out there probably got their own joineries, or they're, working on their own. We got really, really good joiners. In fact, we got probably one or two of the best joiners around because they're a lot older. They had their own joineries and they just want to come in and just, do the work in the week and go home and not have to take it home with them and think about it.
Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting point that on your last podcast with Robin that he made about the retired or retiring people working with the youngsters coming through. And that made me think about, because we've tried to set up heritage training things. I mean, you could do a podcast on its own about that ridiculous butting your head against the brick wall or a stone wall in our case, not flint. But my dad's 70 next month. Absolutely no chance he's going to be stopping working anytime soon. He wants to be training people. If he could just be doing that now, he would just be doing that now. And it would be a great little sort of semi-retirement for him. What that man has forgot, I will never know. But we can't, we're running a business at the end of the day. We can't have loads of trainees on our jobs because we're not big enough to accommodate. They slow everything down as much as we love it. So we're on a big job in Great Yarmouth, big church job, and we got the job because we would take on these trainees. So we have 4 lads from a local college. I think we had them for 12 weeks. And I had absolutely no involvement other than 2 days teaching them about lime mortars. But my dad was showing them how to carve stone effectively. So you're at the church. So whatever stone's got to be replaced on the wall, he would show them how to take the molds, bed molds, face molds. You've got the block of stone there, transfer the molds onto the stone, and then he would teach them how to hand carve the moldings through. And through 12 weeks, they then took it from block, sawn 6 size, they carved it themselves, and then they fit the stone on the church.
Wow.
So every process, they're getting, 12 weeks is not a long time. They're having a small insight into every part of that process. I then took them on a few surveys with me and showed, how we sort of diagnose issues on listed buildings, how we would draw that up. And one of them is going to come and work for us when he finishes college in the summer. But there's nothing behind that. That's so rare that you get that length of time with them and you're getting paid on top of the contract to actually teach them. We've always been frustrated with youngsters who we've got in who want big money straight away, but don't actually want to go through the learning. And I just wondered whether that's the same in your, find that in your industry.
Yeah. We literally, we had an apprentice and he was coming up to the end of his second year, decided that he wanted to get paid more. And when I said, yeah, well, when you finish your apprenticeship, we can have a look at that. And yeah, we probably will put out, no, it's not good enough. See you later. No, but we've had loads of, it's always the younger guys that come in, not all of them, but a lot of the younger guys come in and think, well, I'm doing a trade. I want 250 quid a day because I've seen my mate is a Sparky. He's getting 250 quid a day. And you think, well, it's not how it works, unfortunately. And it's a weird, if you put it on a graph, right? The trades with the most level of skill are probably some of the least well paid. Stonemasonry, huge amount of skill that, to be a master at it is going to take your lifetime. Joinery, pretty much the same, You're probably going to be an improver for the first 5 years of your career. In the first 5 years of your career, you're not going to be able to make every single thing from a drawing. You're going to struggle with a lot of stuff in those first 5 years out of college. Whereas if you're an electrician, you come out of college after 2 years, it's not, there's things that you might, complicated consumer units or something like that might be a bit tricky, but running cables around, putting sockets on the wall, it's not super difficult, but you can charge really good money for it. Same with plumbing, there's certain things you've got to be able to do a good solder joint and stuff like that and know your testing, but it's a thing that you can go to college for 2 years and come out and be proficient enough, near enough to start out on your own. Stonemasonry, no chance. Joinery, no chance. I'm trying to think of other trades in the really kind of skilled, like mirror gilding. Forget about it. They're things that do cost a lot of money, but you've got to invest a lot of time. For instance, a front door. You look at, I have this conversation with a friend of mine, Damo, who's another joiner. We'll ring each other up probably once a week or something and go, didn't get this job. Put in a cost for a front door in a frame. And it was like 4 or 5 grand, 6 grand, whatever. And he'll do the same. They go, I put in a cost for a 5 grand front door and a frame. Told me it's too expensive. They're going to buy something from Wix or whatever. But we both know that the labour involved in buying, and the timber costs, timber's gone up, everything's expensive. By the time you bought the materials, the labour involved in that is, at least a week, plus then the finishing, plus a day or two on site, mucking about with it, and that it's not just going to go in perfectly. There's going to be a lot of making good and shaving down to fit it in the aperture. But it's just there's only so many people that pay it, whereas everyone needs sockets in the house. Everyone needs pipes. Everyone needs heating. Everyone needs water. So joinery, probably a bit similar to stonemasonry, is like a luxury for a lot of people. Be able to spend that money on something that they see every day and they use every day, but it's in many cases, in some cases, it is essential because they've got a window falling out or they've got a wall that's half falling down. But in many cases, it's a nice thing to be able to do rather than something that's essential. But at the same time, it's one of the hardest things to do skills-wise. So it's a really tricky one. You got to love it. I'd imagine it's same with joining. You got to love what you do, and it is a very satisfying job. Don't get me wrong. Everyone who I know who does it,
you get that love for it after being immersed in it, don't you? Like, no one is born loving stone or wood. You be around, you're around other craftsmen who are so passionate about it that you can't help but be infused by that. And that's like the old man. Those 4 lads, because we've done some videos with them, they loved working with him because he's so enthusiastic about it and he loves it, and he was knackered after doing that with him. But they got so much from it because of how much he was giving them. So it's not in a classroom explaining how you do it. He was giving them the block of stone and letting them make their mistakes on it. And then he'd tidy it up after and it'd be fine. He'd chuck it in the wall. But you can't, these things have to be learnt over time, don't they? And that's, I guess, is a wider issue, but people don't want to give things time. Like, young people don't want to do a 3-4 year apprenticeship and then do 5 years as an improver, unless you do find the gem who actually, if that is what they want to do. Also, you don't want to go and work in the cold. I know this because I didn't want to do it either. It's difficult. It's difficult. I don't know what the answer really is with that either. I've got no answers in this conversation, but we'd love to be involved in more of that. I always said we were trying for years, literally years, to get this set up, and some of the conversations were ridiculous. That we found to that whole premise of repairing the church whilst you're training them and being immersed in the church. There were some redundant churches. We went and had countless conversations with trying to take them over for training purposes. They wouldn't give us the church because we didn't have the funding. They wouldn't give us any funding until we had the premises. So we were like, well, what do we do with this then? Because you won't sell it to us privately because it can't be owned privately. So where are the answers? What's the solution? In the meantime, we're trying to run a business, and over the time, it falls away. But we always, on the big sort of lottery funded projects, there's always hard hat days and heritage open days where you do a little bit, but they're always the same faces turning up. They're all other architects who are, we're not making any real commitment or making a dent in the skills gap that we've been hearing about for decades. It's just people coming to have a nice day out from the office. It's really frustrating.
But how do you make it sexy and appealing to a teenager to go and be a stonemason? I tell you what, actually, I have seen
hot pants. Branded.
Yeah, maybe. I've seen on Instagram there's a guy, I think he's from up north, that does like little videos. It's TikTok viral videos, something like that. Yeah, just makes his bits up. That sort of thing. We almost need more of that.
Definitely
to draw younger people in who watch it on social media, because every kid's looking at a screen. 9 hours a day.
But also, that is unrealistic to think that you're going to come in and do that, because that we used to do. Well, the dad used to do all of our molds and the banker work, as it's called, in house. We used to do all of it in house. But then you get to a size where you haven't got enough masons in house to do it, so you have to find subcontractors to do it and coming in. The guys on the bench don't earn very much money, and that's it's wrong. But the market dictates what something is worth at the end of the day. So they're not going to be on these cathedrals with a vest on, working a bit of stone. It doesn't happen. So he's great, and he's great to watch, and he's good at what he does. But if someone's attracted into stonemasonry because they've seen that, it's a bloody big fall from grace from there, because that's not the reality of it. The reality is, you might be on a church tower in the rain, looking at the North Sea being blown off the scaffold, fitting a piece of label stone. That's this. It's not always that glamorous.
Yeah,
you have to love it. I don't know how you.
Well,
I suppose I could have more kids and try and, but it's not. It's a long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that comes with all sorts of issues of succession, though, doesn't it? If you have too many kids,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a prime example, and I love stonework, but I don't want to do it. And I don't think my dad's disappointed with that at all. But it's a great story, third generation stonemason, but realistically, I'm not that. I know enough about it to sell the products and to run a part of the business doing it, but I'm not a stonemason realistically. But I have the passion for it. It's difficult. It's hard. You got to find someone who's got the want to do it and develop the passion for it. I don't know where you find them.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, we've been trying to set up a school, a joinery school, for a couple of years now, but it's that same chicken and egg problem that we're finding. We can't use our current workshop as the workshop for the school for two reasons. We're still using it as a business, but we can't, because the ideal one would be to set up a charity so you can access charitable funding, charitable status, and all the benefits that comes with that, because essentially it is charity. You're not setting up a school to make money. You're setting up a school to pass the trade on, pass the skills on, and the knowledge that will be lost otherwise. And what we're trying to set up is, we'll probably do heritage work, restoration work, conservation work, but we'll kind of do it as almost a
module within it.
Yeah, it'll be a module within a course, but it'll almost do it as a volunteer basis. We'll find Great Dixter somewhere like that near to us, and we'll go and part of the term will be doing a project like that. That's what we're trying to build into the syllabus that we're writing at the moment. But the problem we have is we can't register it at the workshop there. We can't get any kind of grant or income, or even claim any kind of charitable money to then set up another unit until we've got that unit and we can show that we're doing it. So it's a real tricky one. I think we found a solution, but it's going to be sort of 5 years' time. But
yeah, and all of these, your business needs to be in a place where you can afford to go and do that.
Yeah,
my business needed to be in a place where we could afford to, one, lose a really good stonemason, but also you need to put cash in to set these things up.
Yeah.
So if you can't get grants, you got to do it out of your cash flow. Why is someone in government not recognising that? Why are they making it harder for small businesses to operate rather than making it a bit more relaxed so there's a bit more money in there?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's another conversation.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of my landlords the other day. Great guy, done very well in business, and he's done it in kind of businesses similar to ours. And he said, "Yeah, I don't really understand what the government are doing.
No, I don't think they do."
Well, there is that. You put a tax on cigarettes to stop smokers from smoking because they're killing themselves and spending a lot of money in the NHS. Tax alcohol because same sort of reason, right? So you tax cars to stop pollution. Tax business.
Yeah, to stop growth.
Where's the logic? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know much. It would, when I watch this back. But yeah, it defies logic. You see towns like Great Yarmouth that used to be industrial.
Same as Hastings. Well, not
yeah, I mean, I drove down there last, and there's a lot of similarities. It was dark, so maybe there isn't so many, but Felixstowe, for instance, all these little coastal, they rely so heavily on tourism, but they're just going, they're getting worse and worse. So it's less attractive for people to go there. There's no industry there. I don't know. You don't want to say too much, do you, on these topics? But it just feels like the system's working against business rather than working with it. But the knock-on effect that has to things like training and these trades that are just going to die off. I mean, that AI is fantastic, but it's not going to replace it. It's not going to replace a stonemason. It's not going to replace a joiner. It can't happen. Not bespoke work. Obviously, to a degree, there's some systems and automations that can, but restoring. At the moment we're on the town wall, it's 750-year-old battlement. AI is not going to come and take that job, but who is going to do that job if the training isn't there and if the people aren't coming through? It's complicated, but it seems like it could be a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, it really could. I think back in the day there was the colleges kind of did that, didn't they? The trades colleges, I can't remember what they're called. We had one in Hastings, it was fantastic, and there's all old boys that had been in the trade, time served, and they get to kind of retirement-ish age and then start teaching at the college. And that was perfect. Yeah. And that's kind of dropped off a bit now.
Yeah.
You don't see so many from there.
Health and safety guy come out, and I was chatting to him, and he thought it was interesting to come from someone who does his job. It's the average age of a bricklayer in the UK is 56.
Really?
I haven't fact checked that, but then I started thinking about my guys, and that's probably it's certainly about right for us. And he said that what he'd noticed, and he's been in construction all his life, is when CITB came in, that's when the standards started to drop. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not. I don't really get involved in CITB too much. But I just thought that was an interesting take for the Construction Industry Training Board, and people were sort of aligning the industry falling off to the insertion of that training board. There's got to be something behind that.
Yeah.
Wonder. I'm of the mindset you have to control your own economy in your house, but also in your business. And the way you do that is by pulling different levers and testing and measuring and seeing what works and what doesn't. Sounds like you're looking at similar things to us in terms of your delivery. And you just have to try and get into a different market all the time. The lowest price tender, that creates so many problems. Again, and probably another podcast for that, but you just have to be better and aspire for more to get yourself out of that market. Again, it's simple, but it's not easy. The delivery part is so difficult. And there's a lot more when you're actually running the business that goes alongside it, and getting all those things aligned isn't simple. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you know what you're doing. You've got an idea of what you're doing now, and I think actually the path similar path to me, the path that you've taken with the ups and the downs, it's got you to where you are today, and you kind of more focused on what you're doing and with a better idea of how to do it. And I know it's a bit cliche to say it, but pressure makes diamonds, right? It turns coal into diamonds, and that's, I think, many business owners that have been through similar sort of things. Without it, they wouldn't be where they are today. You have to face adversity to come out the other side shining.
Yeah.
You have to learn the hard lessons the hard way. Otherwise, no one starts business. Very few people start business just have an easy route from start to finish. It's kind of no and impossible. You hear stories every now and again, but you think, really, what else are they doing? But
it's in those lows and those difficult moments you find out whether you actually want to do it.
Yeah.
Have you
got the constitution for it?
Yeah. Have you got the fortitude? And the answer in our case is obviously yes, we have. And the lessons you learn and who you become along that. There's no doubt I'm a better dad now because of going through these things. Because I missed too much of the first 2 years of my firstborn. I wasn't going to do that again. So I don't stay in the office till stupid o'clock. I'll make sure I'm at home to eat with my kids and put them to bed, and then I'll start work after, perhaps. But that is the biggest thing for me. I need to know in my own head that I am the best dad that I can be. And I'm not always, but back to the point of it, if I hadn't gone through all that, I don't think I'd be the dad that I am now. I think I'd still be on the mission to take the business to the moon. It going through that realigns what you need to be, what I need to be personally, not necessarily what everyone thinks that I need to be as a business owner, but what I need to be for me to be happy and make sure I'm doing what I'm doing for my family and not for everyone else's family, And you can get caught up in everyone else and forget to, you're doing it for yourself ultimately. And I think if I'm considered a good dad, a good husband, and my dad's proud of me, something's good. I'm doing something right. And at the moment, it feels like all those things are aligned. They won't always be like that. There'll be weeks and months where they're not. But I think that's the metric where I should focus more on, am I successful? Are those three things where they need to be?
That's a fantastic measure of success. And it takes a lot of maturity to look at it and have that as your metric. The baseline that you're measuring yourself against isn't like what luxury car you're driving and what holiday you're taking. And
clearly,
but it is that's a great measure of success. It's a realistic, but it's also, it's honest, and it means that you're getting more out of it, and your kids, your relationship with your kids is going to be much better for that, and for your sanity probably as well. And that's a really good measure of success, I think.
And again, so to your point, have you not gone through those choppy seas, you don't realize these things, because there are moments through that where there are moments through those periods where you need something to pull you through. And for me, that's my kids. Otherwise, I don't know whether I would have got them through those moments, truthfully. So now you're through it, you have to remember that and ground yourself and realize that's the important thing. But my point in all this is that you have to go through that crack to realize what you've got.
Yeah, I agree. On that note, if you could go back to 18-year-old Steve and give him a piece of advice, what would it be, do you think?
He wouldn't have listened.
Would any 18-year-old?
No. I think I would tell him there are other ways to learn that don't need to be so painful. You don't have to learn by falling over all the time. Find advice, because it wasn't around me, is the truth at the time. I didn't have the advice around me. Find the advice because it is there, and take the advice, because otherwise, you're in for a rough ride, and you could just accelerate your success by not just falling in every hole that's in front of you. You can move around them by getting advice, and I think that would be the main point I'd try to get her. And also I'd say don't support West Ham. There are other options.
Yeah. Well, at least you've set yourself up for disappointment from an early.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was ready for it. I was made for it.
Well, I mean, that was great advice, Steve. It's been a real pleasure having you on it. And it's nice to have a genuine, honest conversation with someone that is in a similar position to me, but also probably to a whole load of other people out there that have been through similar sort of things and have got similar aims and ambitions, maybe not in exactly the same trade, maybe completely different to both of us. But, it's really nice to have an honest conversation about it rather than looking at Instagram and looking at mates in Dubai who live in the high life driving supercars, because, life isn't that, I think.
Business definitely isn't that. There are some unicorns, obviously, but I think everyday businesses go through this ups and downs, and nothing's linear, especially when you've got a family to think about in the background as well. Yeah, but no, thank you for having me. It's been brilliant.
It's been really, really good, and hopefully we'll get you on again, maybe next year, see where you're at.
Yeah, maybe.
Excellent. Cheers, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Thank you.